Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. We have to do the intro. Yes. So we talked about dancing and daydreaming and
Water
um,
swimming.
open water swimming,
Hop
hmm,
and hip hop.
hip hop. Uh, I try to talk about ballet, which I never done. I don't speak the language of it, but I just went to the Swan Lake and ballet, and which was from France, which is a traditional, so it wasn't modern. Which and I was a little bit not shocked, but
I can see, I can just imagine like the shock, like not the shock, but the mystified face you would have had just sitting there.
yeah, it's like,
What is
oh,
happening?
because I've seen ballet. Of course, I've seen ballet, but not. I just realized I'd never been to a performance, a live performance on stage. I've seen it on
Yeah, of
television. So,
course.
I grew up with classical music and I've never seen ballet in real life. I just realized that. But it's such a common thing. Ballet, everybody knows ballet. So, I bought this ticket for my wife because we were old now. So we're like, we're going to do old people things. That's what I said to her, by the way. Happy birthday. Here's that. We're going to do ballet. She said, we were going to do what?
I did
And
buy you guys a bird feeder for your anniversary. I'm regretting this.
no,
Is
yeah,
that too
exactly.
expensive?
Morgan gave us a bird feeder. We're going to ballet now,
Is she?
and yeah, so we're getting old, and no, and the so anyway, we went in Swan Lake, in a very traditional kind of setting, so not modernized, and the curtains opened, and I was like, oh, ooh, this is
I think.
this is odd. This is kind of weird. This is like, if I know it has this huge, it has a long history, so it is a traditional thing. And but if it's totally new, so I was like this alien that was dropped in this thing, had no clue what was going on, and then you go like, this is kind of absurd in a
I
way.
was trying to think of the last time I felt like that. And I've got to be honest, the last time I felt like that when I was at the airport, right before my burnout was about to get much, much worse. And that's even weirder because I was in a familiar place. I've been to airports lots of times. I know how you go through security. I know that you have to give the passport to the
Oh
guy, you
yeah.
have to stand and have them check your body and make sure you're not smuggling things forbidden on planes. But my brain just totally misfired and thank God there was a sweet girl behind me. It's like, I'm so sorry. I can't remember anything. What am I supposed to do right now?
Wow.
It was so strange to feel like an alien, and probably also strange a bit for you last night to find yourself in a new world that you didn't even realize existed.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I didn't. Well, I had a nice lady also. Yeah, my wife next to me. You're like, Arna,
When we clap.
don't. Yeah, you have to clap now. Clap now. What? What's happening? What's happening? And yeah, a familiar thing. So that's it, right? So there's a familiar thing, but you look at it in a totally new way
Yeah. Yeah.
because, well, maybe because there's something
With
wrong
your
with you. You might, or you're kind of, you're, yeah, like me, all of a sudden seeing something from up close.
Yeah. And you said this is your first time in person as well. So
Yeah, it's like, yeah, and also not knowing the language. It's like, I think if you put me in a sort of a situation where I would observe a tradition in a culture that I didn't know anything about, and this happens actually. This
yeah.
happened to me before. Like I'm somewhere part of something. I've been at a Oktoberfest in Brazil, right? Which is
Ah, okay,
really
cool.
weird because it's not like in Germany, yes, but a Oktoberfest in Brazil, kind of, which was very, very strange because it wasn't the German. It was, again, I felt like this alien. Actually, I thought they were aliens, by the way, and they picked up on some television program from Earth, and the only little snippet of television they got from Earth, light years away, was an Oktoberfest, and they thought it was from the gods, and they created their own Oktoberfest, but they kind of misunderstood most of it, and so
That does sound
anyway,
like a very alien thing to do. Yeah.
yeah, 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 that's a very alien thing to do. Anyway, why are we talking about this? Well, actually, taking something out of context.
Yeah.
We talk about, in this case, Natalie talks about, she's a dancer, and that's really important to her. And but she uses that, or that's sort of how she understands also design, and how she can
Mhm.
communicate design, and actually how she makes it way more clear because she creates a connection between something that might be for some people might be very different. How is that connected? How is dance connected to kind of being in design thinking?
Yeah.
But it is because everything is connected.
Yeah.
And what you said also in the podcast was that you know you can use these personal experiences or what some people might call hobbies. I don't like the
Mhm.
word hobby, to be honest, but these other things that you also have in you, these other skills or interests or curiosities or whatever you have and experiences, be it going through life, basically all these things that you collect,
Mhm.
you can use them for whatever you do in business. If you're a to
Yeah.
your point, right? If you're a therapist, or if you're a designer, or if you're a manager, these are things that can inform what you do. Yeah,
Yeah. And she talked about, of course, her book is called Move, Think, Rest. I think it'll be out in September, she maybe mentioned. Um, but she talks about this cycle that sometimes you just need to pause. That
yeah,
okay, and if the hobby is the pausing for us, okay, I did a full day's work. I'm gonna go participate in my Tai Chi class.
yeah.
That's
That's kind of so. Her open water swimming was, for instance, that was also powerful, because she said it's sort of like meditation, right?
mhm.
And what was it called? Sort of just repetitive movements, kind of
Yeah,
is also kind of a meditation.
yeah.
And I that all I have that with things like music playing, and now
Mhm.
I can just sit behind a piano or guitar, and I just kind of just noodle a little,
I love that word. Yeah.
yeah, and then I'm not thinking about anything, and it just flows, and I don't know if people around me like it. They might go like, "Can you please stop doing that?" I know my son will turn up the sound of the television sometimes because he's trying to hear something, Dad. Well, I'm gonna be just doing this thing on the piano. Um, but it is that, and it's being a complete person, right?
Yeah.
All these bits are part of you, and it's not just this, this. And I know we're kind of always in. There's a bit of theater and everything. I always feel,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Now I'm the business person. But if you
Thank
for,
you. Yeah.
yeah, right. So now I'm the creative, and now I'm the whatever. But if you I don't know, you use all these other things as well, they will resonate more with the people that you're trying to kind of communicate with, or kind of at least share an experience with, or try to teach them something, or try to lead them,
Mhm.
or something.
Yeah.
These are the things that are most powerful, these personal things
Yeah,
that
for
you,
sure.
right?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love this podcast so much is we get so many incredible, beautiful, wild personal stories. And it's not just, oh, tell me what what your three metrics are for creative leadership. It's
That'd be
these
so
personal
boring.
stories that would be terribly boring. I would never listen.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be very, very boring. That's the podcast the AI can create. Google created a sort of an AI that can create podcasts out of texts. They can do that. I could
Yeah.
go. That must be so horrible.
I was
Uh,
thinking, and one of the examples that came to mind during the podcast, but I didn't share it, so I'll share it now to the um she was talking about how AI can never replicate a real world experience, and I won't give you guys any spoilers, but one of the things I was thinking of is you mentioned that performances, things will go wrong, right?
Mm,
Somebody might drop their drumstick
mm,
or somebody misses that cue for the dance move or something. But I also, that collective energy, like if you can imagine that everybody's in a theater watching a play and all of a sudden a set piece falls over. Everybody's
mm.
safe, but the set piece falls over. Everybody knows the set shouldn't have fallen over. You're going to feel this like collective tension and okay, how's the actor going to respond to this moment? And then
Mm.
he champions through because he's a master at his craft. And then you feel this kind of collective
Oh
thing.
yeah, but there's also support. Like I was at a concert a couple of days ago, because I go to concert all the time apparently, or do ballet or concerts or anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, but David Gray was at his concert in Amsterdam, and he did this thing with a where he would record a guitar, and it kind of replays. So he creates these loops, and
Mhm.
then he plays over that loop, and et cetera, et cetera. And then he went on, started playing piano and singing over these loops he created, which was really cool, really beautiful. And then but he pressed the wrong button, and he kind of everything kind of all of a sudden went quiet. Boop, and he said, "Oh shit, it wasn't supposed to do that." And he switched it on again. But it was his moment, you know.
Yeah.
That's but because everybody in the room came for him and his music, and everybody kind of was supportive, and so that would never happen with AI. That's not a
Oh,
thing you do. It's a mistake, and it created a little bit of a tension or something.
yeah.
But also afterwards, we you really wanted to tell him it was okay. It's okay. We still
Yeah.
liked it. It was okay.
We
All
know
right.
you're a
And
human.
you're watching him like, and then with his other musicians came on again, and he was like, you saw them kind of go like, what was that? Like, oh, I don't know, and they were very comfortable, and he started talking,
Yeah.
telling a story, and the human vulnerability,
Yes.
the
And that's what
human.
AI can't do.
No,
AI will be able to make mistakes on purpose.
sure, it can replicate, it can do
It already
exactly
is a bit,
that, and
but
it's totally boring.
yeah. Yeah.
Who cares? Oh, look, they
The
programmed a
vulnerable bot.
mistake.
It was a vulnerable bot. Then we'll talk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my God, yeah. So yeah, so yeah, and I think this talk was a lot about vulnerability in that sense of learning, uh, being able to stop these cycles of
Yeah.
you know you need to kind of sometimes just kind of stop and to your point as well, if you plant a seed, you can't force it to grow, you know those little things. That's vulnerability, because you have no control over that,
Yeah.
you know right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Shall we listen, or
I think we
any?
shall listen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, enjoy.
Quick question. Are you both based in the Netherlands?
Yes.
Where in the Netherlands?
For me, I'm in The Hague, so just south of Amsterdam.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and
And
I'm in Haarlem, which is
Okay.
quite.
Okay.
Are you familiar with?
I I visited, I've been to Amsterdam and Delft and Leiden.
Mhm.
Leiden. Yeah.
My husband and I want to go to Rotterdam for the music festival, the jazz
Oh
festival.
yeah, me too. Me
So
too.
good.
It's almost there.
So
Yeah,
good.
I keep missing it every year. We go,
I heard
yeah,
it's we have friends who've gone like multiple times a
yeah,
year,
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
looking forward to that. But yeah, I've been to the Netherlands, and that's actually where I learned about a particular lock that's very common on bikes over there, but not so common here. And I bought myself a pedal assist electric bike 2 or 3 years ago, and I have that lock that is like a simple key, but I also here we have to be concerned about theft a lot more of bikes, so I have also like a little cable, but I love that very simple. It's
Oh,
that U lock.
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's very
yeah.
it's not seen
Is
here a
it?
lot.
Oh, I so funny, right? Things that are so
I
common
know.
to you, you go like, "Is that special? Isn't what's why is that?"
Very special
Oh,
here. I have a, oh, what's that lock?
oh, that's so nice. For us, that's the lock that does not prevent theft.
No.
That's
It doesn't prevent theft, but man, when you
yeah,
have a battery connected to your bike, it's heavier and
yeah, it's
a
true.
little slower for a thief to figure it all out. So, it helps.
That's true. That is
It's a
true.
barrier to entry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We use it all the time. I have it, of course. Yeah, I have a bike. I have a bike that nobody will steal because it's old and it's a crappy bike, so they won't steal it. So I just use that lock. But my son, he has sort of a bike, and it's more important because he has to go to school with the bike, and it's a little bit newer, and so he has to have at least two locks. It is
Yeah.
otherwise the insurance company won't also pay
Yeah.
back. Because it also has an insurance, which is odd, really, for bikes. But anyway, yeah.
Mhm.
Mm. That's so nice. Yeah. So, Morgan, you want to
Yeah.
ask the
And
first
then
question because we.
sure. We'll ask the first question and yeah, so the first question is um imagine that, I don't know, you bump into somebody at a design conference and they said, "Oh, I've heard oh yeah, I've heard about you. Like I know I happen to know your CV." Kind of sounds creepy actually, but somehow they know your CV. They know your portfolio. They know about you as a professional, but they say, "Who is Natalie Nixon as a person?" What would you say?
Um, as a person, I would say I'm a super curious hybrid thinker. I'm a lifelong dancer. I am a person who the mission in what I do is to change lives with ideas, and that's what got me out of bed every morning when I was a professor for 16 years, and that's what gets me out of bed now as a creativity strategist. Um, I am someone who um, loves to daydream, and I have that avocation is a big part of it's led me down this path related to my next book because I wondered why don't we give more credence to this thing that I so easily do that leads to even better work and ideas. We act like I remember being in like first grade and like um my book reports, my teacher reports saying Natalie's doing very well in school, but she tends to daydream out the window a little too. And I continue to do that, but I see great benefits of that, and we could talk about that kind of mindset later. But yeah, that's what I think. How I would describe myself as an insatiably curious hybrid thinker. Dance is a big part of my world and my life. I am native to the United States, a solid Gen Xer, happily married for 16 years, proud stepmom. Those are the sorts of things. And new to open water swimming, which is
Oh,
like my jam. Yeah.
Ooh, that's
that's
very cool.
open water swimming. Yeah, like also like in the ocean.
Oh yeah, in the
Yeah,
ocean.
yeah.
Yeah, I did my first open water swim in Crete, Greece in 2023. I did my second one this past November, 2024 in Nevis. And my
Mm.
third one I'm doing in Costa Rica, end of May.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow, very
Um,
cool. Very cool.
yeah, that's I'm thinking open water swimming. That's. I don't know why, but I like swimming. I'm not a big. I mean, I think. I don't know. I don't hate swimming. No, I like swimming. I just had to think about this. Like, what do I think of swimming? Open water swimming in the ocean. To be honest, that also kind of scares me a little bit. It's a bit
That's
like,
understandable.
yeah,
That's really understandable. The ocean is vast and it could swallow us whole, but
yeah,
it's
it
Yeah.
does.
also,
So
70%.
powerful.
It's so powerful and it's also so life sustaining.
Mm,
70% of the earth is water,
yeah.
70% of our bodies are water, 70% of the brain is water.
Mm,
When we're in utero, we're floating around in some kind of liquid. So I have found the sea to be incredibly restorative to me. And also as an African American, We have a complex relationship with the ocean, given the history of enslavement and the
Mm.
Middle Passage. So it's been a very spiritual awakening for me as well to literally dive into the ocean. But this is a British company called Swim Trek that organizes these swimming holidays. And it's not like they throw you into the water and say, "Okay, go swim 3K." It's very respectable and curated and lovely. It's really wonderful.
Wow.
And how did you get into open water swimming? Because I don't think I've met a few people who are into it and they're really cool, but they all have very different stories. Most people don't wake up one day and say, I'm gonna become an open water swimmer.
Yeah, I didn't wake up and think that. And a lot of the people I meet who are on these treks, we are a very distinctive, self-defining group of people who decide to spend holiday time swimming in the Mediterranean or the Caribbean or parts of North Africa or Southeast Asia. But I would never swim competitively growing up. My mom taught us to swim at the local, what she didn't teach us. We went to lessons. I grew up in Philadelphia, spent summers at the Jersey Shore, some summers in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, and always loved the water, but didn't know how to really properly swim, I would say. Laps, for example, I felt comfortable though. And in college, I studied abroad in Brazil, and the currency exchange was so advantageous to the US dollar. As a college student, I was able to afford swimming lessons at a country club near my neighborhood where I was living in Bahia, Salvador de Bahia. And I learned the proper way to swim by a 70-year-old Brazilian man who never got in the water, didn't speak any English. And he really taught me that swimming is learning how to breathe differently. Got back to the States, just started practicing. And then over the decades, that became a stronger swimmer, but always in pools with lanes and black lines
Mm.
and cords, ropes, and taught myself how to do flip turns by watching YouTube videos in my late 30s. And in August of 2022, a good friend of mine texts me and says, "You have got to try this." And I'm looking at her text
Yeah.
and it's linked to this company called Swim Trek. And I think, oh my gosh, this looks amazing. Also, I can't do this. I've never done water swimming, but she knew about our mutual love of swimming because we were on a work trip together in Palo
Ah,
Alto
right.
and realized, so anyway, it was my friend Ivy who shared information about Swim Trek that bolstered me to try. And I'll share with you guys a personal essay that I wrote that got published about that
Oh,
time in
cool.
Greece. And it was life-changing.
That's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah, and well, it's also, again, it's interesting. It's always, we are so influenced by the people we know, and because they give us the, yeah, it's just that things always go like that. It's never like a plan. It's like someone goes like, oh, it's so great to kind of also be in that flow, if you will, that
Yeah.
if you have people around you who gives you these different options, and you're like, and because they know you, it's
Well, yeah, and because they know they see something in you
yeah,
often that you don't recognize yet.
exactly. So yeah, that would be a great bridge to leadership. But I actually wanted to ask, well, there's two things that came to mind when you talk about swimming. I'm being a Dutch person with kids. There in my country, there's two things we teach kids, and we just talked about bikes as well. It's cycling, how to cycle and swimming. Those are the two things. We teach them immediately because there's so
Yeah.
much water. So. And obviously, most of our country is below sea level, and so there's our relationship to water has a lot to do with danger and awareness of there's water, so you need to be able to swim, and also, and we're obviously close to the ocean is right there, and so there's always this sense of danger, and we have to manage it. It's very
Yeah.
very connected to our culture as a country. So because water it's not just the ocean, but it's the rivers as well. Because this is a delta, basically. The whole country is a delta. So it's such a strong relationship to everything that has to do with water, and so also swimming. And it's so interesting to yeah. Because and obviously we can have fun with it as well. My kids love swimming, But it's so interesting if you when talking about water for a Dutch person. It has such a different kind of context as well. So
Mm.
fascinating, which
And
can.
we all have a relationship with water, whether we're terrified of it, uh, feel like yeah, aren't near it a lot, or we love it. We all have a relationship with
Yeah.
water.
Well, yeah. I mean, like you said, we were made of it. I mean, it's everywhere. It's life-giving, and but yeah, but it's interesting in this country that I was driving on a highway, so between here and Amsterdam, and then there's a like you go underneath a bridge, and just before you kind of drive underneath the bridge, there's a big sign saying, I think it says about 4 meters under beneath sea level. And so we go like, look, we're like the sea is over there. That's where the
Oh
sea
my
level is,
gosh,
right? So,
what a
and
visual.
yeah. So it's such a I don't know. It just came to mind that story. And the other thing is about, and that's how I have a question about this. Is about dancing, and um, you're wearing a t-shirt saying ballet. Yeah. So for the podcast listeners, but I went to the ballet yesterday. So Swan Lake. And because I gave it as a present to my wife when she's with her birthday, I usually give like concert tickets and stuff like that. And we're grown-ups now, so I said we're going to the ballet. You want to do what? And it's actually interesting because I don't. Well, I'm not a dancer. Actually, really bad at it. Way too self-conscious, by the way. I think that's part of the reason. I'm very tall, and I always feel very tall and clumsy when I have to dance. But going to the ballet, I realized I was sitting there, and we had quite good seats up front, and I realized that I never seen ballet live. I've seen it on television. I grew up with the music. I knew the music song like because my father's, it was all classical music in my home, but I had never seen it in real life like that. If right there. So I was actually a bit like, ooh, this is actually quite weird. This is like this is such a weird way of expressing things. And no, I didn't know that because I don't know the language of it. And there were lots of people who knew because people came to see ballet. And if you know what they're doing, and you know what the things that they're doing are really good or not so good or something. You know what it's a language. So like dance, basically, it's this language. I just didn't speak the language, so it took me a while to get into it. Go like, what are they doing? Oh, why are we clapping? Oh, they did a really amazing thing, and oh, it's all kind of everything is sets, right? Like it's all kind of yeah, I don't know. I was so amazed by it. And so
Yeah.
I just want to I was so curious to hear your story about, your relationship to dance and because you said it's so important to you. And
Hmm.
where does that start and what does that mean?
Well, dance, like all language, affords us a point of view. It helps us to express a point of view and perspective. And I actually am not grounded in ballet at all. I'm wearing a t-shirt
Mhm.
for Ballet X, which is Philadelphia's
Ah,
premier contemporary ballet, modern
right.
ballet
Yeah.
company. So modern ballet, contemporary ballet, sometimes the dancers are on point in the toe shoes, but a lot of the time they're doing a lot of modern dance choreography, maybe on point, maybe not, maybe
Mm,
barefoot, but they're using the technique of ballet to inform that movement. So modern dance technique encompasses Horton technique, Graham, Dunham, Limon, Cunningham. There's a whole range of different techniques in modern dance, and I studied Horton technique of modern dance. I actually never really got grounded very well in ballet, but ballet is incredible for technique, and I'm sure you observed Arne at the ballet.
I was blown away by it was like so the main dancer, the lady who did, I don't know again, I don't speak the language of ballet, the prima ballerina, she was sort of the swan basically, and I was, first of all, I don't understand what they're doing, but I was like, wow, this must be so hard. But I also have the stories, I've seen documentaries, but this is French, they were from France, this is French ballet, and they were really good. totally. But I also thought, oh, they're so strict and all these stories, about, it was very traditional as well. Very traditional. It wasn't
Well,
modern.
yeah, it's Swan Lake. I mean,
Yeah.
contemporary ballet, modern ballet breaks the line a lot more.
Yeah.
It introduces contractions, which is part of modern. So what modern
Yeah.
dance did was to break the very strict line in European classical ballet,
Right.
where the head is never even far off from the line of the spine,
Right.
because modern dance incorporated elements of African dance, the contraction, the lateral, the flat back, the flex foot, the barefoot, from Afro-Caribbean movements as well. And actually, when I lived years ago in Sri Lanka, I took traditional Southeast Asian Sri Lankan dance, and it helped me to appreciate the value of the neck and the eyes that move
Ah.
as well as part of movement. So all dance have these, dance itself is multilingual, and you understand culture through dance, you understand history through dance, you understand politics through dance. And for me, I just got back from the first ever alums of the dance company of my college. I went to Vassar College. We had a dance company. Now there's like all these great, cool dance troops, mini dance troops that students have just sprouted up. But back then it was just the dance repertory theater company. And as alums, we went back to celebrate. And I shared how at various points in my life, dance has saved my life. And I say that because dance simultaneously grounds me, because you must know technique. It requires repetition. It's not easy. I'm sure you saw the incredible athleticism
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that
Amazing.
dancers bring to the fore.
Yeah.
People so underestimate the athleticism and the strength it takes to exhibit grace that dancers have, the discipline, the focus.
Yeah.
I credit dance for getting me through earning a PhD while working full time. It equips you with an ability to see something and then deconstruct it and execute on it through very unsexy, laborious, often
Hmm.
sweaty exercises. And then it also has helped me to dream and to envision and to escape, because dance allows you to tell stories in this very fantastical way. So nowadays I study ballroom dance. So I've been studying ballroom consistently for 5 years. And I also do a lot of hip hop dance, which interestingly, when I went back for the reunion of us dance company alums, it was just fascinating to think that. So I graduated from college in 1991. And when I was in college in the late 80s and early 90s, we were literally in the middle of hip hop. We didn't even know what we were birthing, this whole new language and fashion and style and dance and music and ways to manipulate language. So I remember we had Black Sheep come onto campus and De La Soul, and they were like this group of guys who were just like trying to figure it out. Then I moved to New York City right after college, and in the midst of a hip hop revolution. And now hip hop is like a technique of dance. It wasn't even like jazz. It was like, ooh, we're not going to do jazz. We only do modern or ballet. It was very kind of rigid
Right.
back then. So to think about how, for me, dance has helped me to explore myself. It's helped me to explore um, creation in the moment without even knowing it. It's fun.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's a really huge part. It's just fun, and it's joyful. Um, that's why I've committed to always be a lifelong dancer.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I think, of course, and the thing that stuck out to me, well, many things, but one of the things you said, you were in the middle of kind of the hip hop evolution and the very beginning of it. Did you guys know at the time, like, that it was going to be such a pivotal?
No, I remember my dad was a big jazz head, and I love jazz, and I got that from my father. My father played the upright acoustic bass. He learned that in the service. He served in the Air Force right after high school. He had an incredible catalog memory of different recordings of like the cool period of jazz, the bebop period of jazz. So I grew up with that music in my home. My mother, on the other hand, studied to train to be an opera singer. When she turned 50, she learned to play the
Ah,
cello. So my home is full of music, of classical European, jazz, R&B. But my father, in a typical parent way, was like, "What is this rap music?" Like, like, what is this? You know,
uh,
like, what are they doing? You know, because he was older, and he was like, they don't understand like music, but
yeah.
like it's yes and it's like when you think about what young African American teenage boys, young men were doing in the late 70s, early 80s, at a time when we were seeing one of the largest cuts to music programs in public school education, where so many kids in cities no longer had really regular access to music and arts education. These guys figured out how to turn a turntable into a percussion instrument called scrap. I mean, so did we? No, we were just like, it's what young people do, right? They like ignore the parents, just try this other thing over here.
Yeah.
And it turned out that it was incredibly additive to the culture at a time of, you know, you think back who was in political power in the 80s, what the zeitgeist was in the 80s. You have punk on the one hand, you had hip hop, rap on the other. So you had this upstirring by young people to question authority, to dress differently, to speak a little differently, to be audacious, with very limited resources. That, you know, has, you know, hip hop music is the number one music in the world now. And when you look at like Instagram and you look like hip hop
Mhm.
dancers, like you've got Korean people who are incredible hip hop dancers, and you know, Slavic people and South African, you know, it's just become worldwide.
Yeah. I just got to see clips from the I think it was the Red Bull hip hop dance competition that happened recently, and it is insane the level of improv and technical ability, and it is spectacular. And there's so many different approaches to it
Right.
as well. It's fascinating.
But it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
such a great connector. As well. I had an experience where we were I was running a session, a workshop for a student organization called ASEC. And they're like this international student organization that actually they started the organization after the Second World War with a vision on like we have to do like these student exchanges internationally, because if you travel, you see another culture and you're part of something else, that opens your mind. And so okay, anyway, it's a great, it's a big organization, lots of young people, and they run it like, they also have like a board of directors and a CEO. And so which are all students basically, and anyway, they had this session where they voted for the new president, something like that. And so people were gathering from all over the world. And we were sitting in this big auditorium, um, and they were going to elect this person. And anyway, people are still waiting, and there were a bunch of people coming in and sitting down, and just before it started. And all of a sudden, I think 3, 4 people got up and they started dancing, quite an elaborate, quite a complicated dance. And I was there. I was just a guest, so I was going to do a workshop the other day or something. And I was like, and I had a colleague with me. We looked at them like, oh, that's interesting. And then all of a sudden, everybody got up and they started doing the same dance. It was quite, they all knew the dance. And and we're like, "Ooh, what's happening?" Like, we're like, "Oh, this is I can't. But it was sort of. They told me that it's actually because when they opened African chapters, people from Africa came in and they introduced dances to
Ah.
to us clumsy Europeans. So they said, "Oh," and then all of a sudden, everybody started learning these specific dances, and they were these connectors, and they were doing, and they didn't know each other. They never met each other. A lot of these people never knew. There was the first time they met, but they all knew the dance, and I thought it was so beautiful.
So it wasn't like a flash mob. It
No.
was no. It was literally
It
they
felt
and they
like it. It
kind
felt
of
like it. No,
okay.
they just had everybody knew that those dances, and
Yeah. That's
you know,
awesome.
yeah.
That's
And I
really
thought, yeah, and dancing together, and I was very jealous again because I like, or like I'm so jealous. I would like jump, kind of join in, but I no, but the connection, and the way you're describing it now, like this hip hop and it's the dancing, and through different cultures and different there is the language of it is it's so interesting, because sometimes we don't, it's a language that we don't always see as a language, but it is. And I'm thinking, and I think I hear you say this as well. I mean, I heard you say that it saved your life a couple of times, but also, is there sort of because you moved into design, right? And into leadership. How is dancing sort of, how is that, what do you take from dancing, into the field of design and leadership?
Good question.
well, it's all choreography, right? Choreography is planning out, mapping out movement. You've got um I mean, here's an example of the connection that I wasn't totally conscientious of in the early stages of my career when I was learning about design thinking, starting to teach more human-centered innovation, consult in it. But dance is one of the few art forms that is very hard to preserve and record. So, for example, if you have visual art, you literally have a tangible object that you can look at. Okay, if you
Mm.
have music, we now have sound recordings of music, right? Um, oh, before I forget, there's one thing I just wanted to say about seeing dance live, seeing the ballet live, versus just seeing video. It's very similar also the first time you see musicians perform live. For
Oh
example, classical
yeah. Oh, totally.
orchestra or
Yeah.
you never realize how physical
Yeah.
performing music is.
Especially jazz is amazing.
Especially jazz, but
Yeah.
even European classical, even with the synchronization
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
there's move like there's a swarm of movement
Yeah.
that's happening to create the sound. So I just wanted to mention, I think that's
Oh,
really
and oh, by the way, yeah, sorry, because yeah, now you're saying this, because also what's on was on my mind. And yeah, any live music is amazing, and dance live there, right there, because it's vulnerable, because it could go wrong, and it can't, and they do, and when it doesn't, and sometimes it does go wrong,
oh,
and
things are
but
always going
yeah,
wrong.
yeah, no, but sometimes you notice. Let me put it that, yeah,
Yeah, you
sometimes.
may not notice, but
Exactly.
things are
Something
going
always
wrong.
goes wrong. But the way they solve it, you see how professional they are. It's actually more amazing if you see. But the other thing is that something I just, because hearing you say this, I thought the thought that now kind of is in my head all the time when I see these things. I'm thinking this could never be replaced by AI, because it would be so not interesting to see
Yeah.
like robots dancing or playing music. It's
The
so not interesting.
AI can create can improvise, right?
Yeah,
It can improvise,
for
it
sure.
can create jazz scores. What I think, and we maybe we can go into this even more, and I'll go back to your question
Yeah,
momentarily, but
sorry. Yeah, sorry. I
and that's
distracted.
okay, is there's a sentience of being human, there's a sentient intelligence, there's a human consciousness that is needs to happen
Yeah.
through sensorial connection, eyeball to eyeball. I'll give you an example. I was in Vegas doing some work for Adobe, and there's this really cool space that is a simulation of St. Mark's Piazza in Venice. I think that's the one in Venice. And someone was describing to me like there was like humans who like hand painted the ceiling, and there's this interesting experience you have like, oh, I feel like I'm outside in Venice at sunset, and it's a simulation of that experience, which is very
Mhm.
effective. It's impressive. So I was walking, and then I went outside to get some real sunshine and vitamin D. And I was just standing there with the sun on my face. And I literally was thinking, but the difference is the feeling of the wind on this side of my face, the smell of some barbecue wafting through the air, the feeling of that sunshine that flutters through your eyelashes, the sense in my body of being in a more natural environment. those sorts of things are really significant. And because we are sentient beings, it affects our cognition, it affects our nervous system, obviously, it affects then the ways that we go on to do our work and to interact. So while I think a lot of the things are very impressive, there are dimensions of the technology that can just amplify what makes us uniquely human. But to answer your question, I just want to forget it. So you're asking about like the connection between dance and design. And one of the things I realized later on is because dance is one of the few art forms that is really hard to capture. Like there's so many great choreography in dance that we don't really know how it looked because it was pre-video, pre the film area. There is a technique called labanitation. And Mr. Laban first thought of it. One of my dance professors at Vassar was he's an Australian dancer named Ray Cook. Ray was one of the foremost labanitators in the world. And fast forward, service design uses labanitation often to map movement when they're trying to redesign line cues in hospitals or amusement park or something, because there's something that you need a different technique to capture speed, rhythm, depth, height, width. I learned at the reunion that Ray's labanitation was so on point. They could tell by his labanitation the angle of a dancer's nose versus their body on stage in relation to other, and you need relationship to other actors in the space. So that's one example of a technique from dance that has informed one aspect of design, service design. But also dance afforded me a more immediate comfort with improvising, experimentation, design known as prototyping, because dance, all artists, most artists get really acclimated to admitting they don't know what's going to happen with this. Like if you go to an artist open studio or a work in progress or open rehearsal, and you speak to the art, you chat with the artist later, like, where are you thinking this will go? Or what, they might know the impetus for it, but they're really comfortable saying, I don't know yet. I'm not really sure where this is leading. And there is this confidence in not knowing that I think more leaders need, that I think the prototyping practice and design helps us to do, that there was something very familiar about that when I got to in the design language called prototype. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like, being okay with improvising, and it's a work in progress, and we're rehearsing, we're figuring things out. So those are a couple of examples of the connections I draw very easily between dance and design and the practice of both.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that came up when you were telling us about like your childhood report cards, but then also dancing, and also I think you mentioned it in connection to design, is kind of this concept of daydreaming. And because of course you can, you don't want to be in math class, so you look out the window and kind of just mentally, go somewhere else.
That's what I did.
I think um and then of course you said dance is another way to kind of, escape or be in a different reality, right? You can act out the story of Swan Lake, or you can just be in that moment improvising with somebody or something along those lines. And then kind of tell us the role that daydreaming has kind of, because it sounds like it's a red thread for you right now.
Yeah, so I've written a book that comes out on September 2nd. It's called Move, Think, Rest: Redefining Productivity in Our Relationship with Time. And the book offers a human-centered operating system to flourish. And the book is important right now for three reasons: unprecedented burnout, new rules for remote work, and ubiquitous technology. And in the thinking dimension of, we call it the motor revolution, MTR, Move, Think, Rest motor. In the thinking dimension, I spent as much time writing about daydreaming as I did about meditation. I actually find it very challenging to meditate. I don't practice meditation. I'm not really good at it. But I did learn that there's like a kinesthetic meditation that I actually am doing when I'm swimming laps, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
there's the constancy of movement that gets that activates the default mode network in the brain and helps us to drop into our body, that
I think
helps to
long-term walking does or long distance walking does the same. Yeah.
oh,
yeah, long
interesting.
distance walking,
Huh.
running, kind of that's kind of was happening also with the runner's high. So the daydreaming piece is really critical for just opening up different neural networks in the brain that actually I call like the washing machine for the brain. When we allow the brain to go into default mode network, which we erroneously have thought doesn't matter. That's not when the real important stuff is happening. We've erred on the side of thinking that it's cognition, which is where the important stuff is happening, but that's actually only part of the story. For the synthesis to to occur, you need to allow your brain to get into that expansive state of just drawing in all these other threads
Hmm.
and then synthesizing and making that cognition when you then converge again. But this that diverge, converge, diverge, converge. So the daydreaming helps us to do that is those divergent moments that are really, really important if you don't want to just do like satisfactory work, but like innovative work. It's that's when you get the aha moments. That's when like I'm a big advocate of taking daydream breaks during the day. It could be 90 seconds, it could be 5 minutes. If you have a lot of time, it could be 15 minutes on. But like earlier this morning, I took a 90-second daydream break and was like observing like how an old petal from a dogwood tree had gone down to the concrete and it was like turning kind of brownish and then pink. It's like, oh, those are really beautiful colors. And I just kind of was like looking at this robin that was like pecking in the grass and then something else and but also like listening to the birds because now it's early spring. Um, and then going back to work, I come back happier, more refreshed,
Hmm.
and there is something I'm allowing my brain to do to actually, that movie that was on Netflix, The Queen's Gambit, where they have those great visuals, click, 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 and all the brain is like doing cogs and the wheel, and it's like that's what's happening when we daydream.
So interesting. Have you read the book? It's called Leadership is Language.
No.
Because there's a story, because I had to think about this straight away when you started talking about open water swimming. I was hoping to kind of bring in this little story from the book, and now you gave me this the reason to talk about it because he talks about open water swimming as an example. So he talks about a lot of things, but he talks about leadership as language in the sense that we sometimes just don't have the language that we need to say, hey, stop, or are we actually heading in the right direction? Because we plan for the whole thing and we have no rest, no stop, no something that, and so he there's one story that often quite use I use in explaining sort of this whole idea is he says, when you're open water swimming, you're swimming in the open water and you're doing like in competition, for instance, you're going faster if your head is down, you go fast, but you don't see where you're going. So you have to have your head up every now and then, look around, where are you going? Where's the buoy? And then you're like, okay, this is where we're going. And then you put your head down again. So this heads up moment, which he doesn't speak the design language like we do when we talk about like double diamonds and divergent, convergent, zoom in, zoom out and all that. But basically what he's saying, right? He's saying, okay, you have to zoom out and say, where are we? Stop, hold on, wait a minute, and then decide where to go next. And that's all sort of, anyway, it's really interesting.
Well, I'm glad.
Uh,
Thank you for that recommendation. I wrote down the title, Leadership is
yeah.
Language. I will read it. And what the example from the book that you just shared reminds me of the major life lessons I had this past November when I swam in around the island of Nevis. And there's different levels of these swim trek trips, and this level was called moderate. And I recalled reading in the description that on one of the days, we will do a crossing from the island of Nevis to the island of St. Kitts. But if you want, you can do it as a relay. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll do it as a relay. There's no way I can swim from Nevis to St. Kitts. And also leisurely level is like the foundational level, and it's 3K a day. And it's not like you swim 3K, but it's, it's chopped up into different tranches. And I'm all about leisure at this stage in my life, but I was like,
Mhm.
you know what? This is what fits into my calendar this year. I'm going to try it. We get to the day to do the crossing from Nevis to St. Kitts, and I somehow forgot that relay was an option. And our guides neglected to mention that that was an option.
Oh no.
I was in the slow group, and I did my meditations and prayers in the morning. It was this positive thinking and visualizing, and this will be fine. And we start out, and there were moments where I saw rainbow and sea turtles and starfish and fan coral. Because at that part of the Caribbean Sea, you can see the ocean floor the entire way, and it's about 4.2K, the shortest distance. Now, when you start out, you see a mountain peak on St. Kitts, and that's basically the goal, right? That's what your sighting is. But they also point out smaller mountain peaks because the guides are well aware that there's currents. We don't
Mm.
really know what the water conditions are once we get out there. And you always have a boat shadowing you. Well, in addition to seeing rainbows and starfish and fan coral and sea
Like a
turtles,
movie. Yeah.
I got bopped upside the head by waves constantly. And my right toe, I had fins originally. My right toe just delivered a horrible blister. I had to take off my fins. And then my left shoulder started to ache. And another point, I was like, why the hell am I out here? I am perfectly fine, hugging the coastline. I don't want to be here anymore. Right? Like all the feelings, all the things. And at certain point you're ticking and tacking and just like in sailing. And there was another moment where I got stuck in an eddy and it kept looking at this humongous rock and had a panic attack. And then so my swim pal and I, Peggy, were the last ones to come in. And she had a delightful English accent, which by then was annoying the hell out of me because she just sounded so chipper. And I just wanted to be done with this whole swim. And we had one more headland around, and then we were going to be swimming into Reggae Beach, which was our destination. And she's like, Natalie, shall we go? And I was like, shall we carry on? I was like, okay, let's carry on. And all of a sudden, we saw three orange swim caps. We were wearing pink swim caps. Orange were the faster group swimming towards us. They had finished 90 minutes early, and they came back to that headland point to swim the rest of the way with us. They were like doing back, they're like, hey guys, how are you doing? We're like, we're fine, we're okay. And the point is, I finished. I never swam that far in my life. I'd never need to do that again. But man, the life lessons in terms of we set our goal, we must have these intermediate goals because we will go off course. Our friends and angels are everywhere. There are times when you need to pause, you pause and you get some electrolyte water and some sweets, and then you carry on. And there's times when you feel I'm stuck and you cry out for help, and someone says, it's okay, just back out and we're going to continue this way. So it was just so many life lessons about having goals, having targets, being able to adapt, being attuned to how you feel, dropping into your body, giving yourself rest, having allies and buddies to encourage you and to continue the way. And I think that's one of the big reasons why I love open water swimming, dancing, because it's this metaphorical language. We keep going back to language in our conversation
Yeah.
for life that's hyper physical, that I take back with me into my work about how did I feel? Okay, if I could do that, I can do the next thing and then the next thing.
Yeah, but you can make these connections. So so are you using that story as well in your work, in your keynotes, or when you do some
Oh yeah.
teaching? Yeah, yeah. Because otherwise you should. Yeah, if you didn't, I would
Oh,
because
thank you.
it's a
But can I
wonderful.
say something about
Yeah.
that?
Uh-huh.
It's only really, I'd say in the past uh 2 years that I have more intentionally incorporated personal stories like that into my
Mm.
keynotes. And here's why I I think that I wanted people to take creativity so seriously that I would lead with the research and the data
Yeah.
and the frameworks and the
Yes.
models and the theory, because I want them to understand that creativity is not woo-woo, guys. Creativity is actually the engine to innovate. And it's not
Mm.
just artists who are creative, but the best engineers and scientists and
Mm.
attorneys
Yeah.
and CFOs are super creative, my words, not theirs, when they're doing this toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems. And when I started to drop in a story of being bullied at 5 years old or transferring to a very difficult sort of learning environment in high school, or my stories of dance or what my ballroom dance teacher taught me, or swimming, it's because when we were more personable, we're more relatable, then the content became much more accessible to people. So
Absolutely.
thank you for the encouragement, Arne. And I have started to incorporate those stories
Yeah.
a lot more into my
Well,
work.
because we recognize them. Maybe we haven't been through the exact same experience, but so that's one of the things I was thinking because you're making these connections also with dance, and so we had a lot of guests on this podcast, but who are into music or musicians, and and now they're also in design, or they've been in theater, or etc. And like I have actually. So having sort of I had to really learn that all the things I'd done. I come from a family of artists, and I've been a musician. I still am, and I'm a photographer. I paint, and I had to learn that all these other things I do are actually relevant. They teach me something about the things I do. They're not, they're not isolated. And I always, one of the things I'm always surprised by is that we do this little, sometimes we do when we have a workshop, and mostly when it's in person, we stand in a circle with the participants or whatever group it is, and then we ask people to share something that their colleagues don't know about themselves, just to kind of break the ice a little bit. And often you have a whole bunch of people who are, they play saxophone or they do all these other things, but they don't bring that experience to work because that's sort of part of their private life. And I'm always like, so for me, design thinking or in general, and not specifically design thinking, I guess, opened up this possibility to say, "Hey, I can be more than just this one thing. All these other things are also really relevant and interesting. How can I kind of use all that experience I have?" And I think so your stories can be so powerful because about dancing and about swimming, about childhood trauma, and because it opens up these doors in other people's heads. You're like, oh yeah, I have other experiences, and of course we should be whole persons, right? So instead of sort of no, now I'm an whatever, now a manager, so now I'm gonna
Yeah,
act this way, and I think that makes people so unhappy, right?
it
And
does. It absolutely does make people unhappy. And I think in the future of work, the most innovative companies will be the ones that have managers, leaders that instigate work as inside out work. And when I use that, the inside out work is a phrase I made up just to kind of signify work that has leaders that are curious about your passions and what you do and understand that that actually is not separated from the ways that you land a deal. It's not separated from the ways that you do project management. It's not separated from the ways that you manage an assembly line, right? It's those attributes that you have and those hobbies and those interests that you have that are actually very relevant to how we can come together as groups for the work at hand and to be more curious about it. So look, people aren't sharing this because they're not invited to share it. They're
yeah.
not, leaders aren't exhibiting the curiosity. And at the same time, leaders have to share those parts of themselves.
Mhm.
You can't stand up there and ask people, okay, give me your best questions, guys, or I'm open to your questions, but you don't exhibit your own self-inquiry. You don't ever share what you're curious about or the questions that start to make you change your mind. People are going to be reticent to share their own questions and shy about it if it's not modeled for them. So modeling that behavior of how, because I love bridge, I mean, I actually want to learn how to play bridge. I don't know how to play bridge, but let's say you're a person who loves bridge. or you love chess, or you love auto mechanics or gardening, whatever it is, you sharing that and what you realized over the weekend when you were doing tinkering of XYZ, or Tuesday night when you're hanging out with your pals who do ABC, how that's helped to shed light on this problem. When you share that, you've opened the door for others to um,
Yeah.
bring that personable side of themselves. And you said a very important thing. People are happier,
Hmm.
and being content and being seen for who you are as a full person is really important in our work environments.
Yeah, and I was thinking of this story, and you gave so many good visuals, right? I can almost see what it might have looked like as you're explaining the different mountains and the rainbows. But and of course for you it was not, well, there was many things, but there were many elements you could pull and apply to the process, right, of design and creativity. But had you been like a relationship therapist, there probably also would have been things you could have taken away from that
Yeah.
swim. Or
Oh,
if you're an entrepreneur, the same, there's whatever, whoever you are is showing up to that swim, and it's going to somehow act as a mirror and reflect things back to you. So, like you said, just having more of that space to share more of yourself only
yes.
makes sense from a professional point of view as well.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
So interesting that, I always feel like, well, we're all part of the same sort of world and the same experiences and the same, we, um, um, so if you are really open and you share real stories about, and they're genuine. I mean, these are all kind of cliches almost, but you go like, but we know this. Why don't we, why don't we
We're
do
not
this?
doing it.
What is wrong? Because I've never met anyone who would disagree with this, right? And still somehow, and no, nowadays, I mean, you go like, are we going backwards? So I'm getting a bit worried because if you talk to people, one on one, um, they all know this. Everybody kind of knows this. I mean, sure, there are some evil, crazy people for sure, but that's the minority. Most people are wonderful and they want to do the right thing and they just want to have a nice life and safe and with family and community and all those things. So why don't what's going on in organizations, say, why is it so difficult for managers, for leaders, to kind of create that culture when often, intellectually they'll get it, they know it. If you tell them, they'll get it, but they can't somehow. It doesn't. What's how do we solve this?
Um, so if we um if we only think about things, but we don't follow it up with action,
Hmm.
it's kind of like if a tree falls in the forest and
Yeah.
no one sees it, did it really exist, right? We have to follow it up with intentional action and building it in, baking it into our rituals, baking into the ways that we run meetings, baking into the ways we hire, baking it into our incentivation plans, baking it into our KPIs. So sometimes a lot of the times, the most innovative changes, the most innovative results happen from the most subtle shifts, right? Systems change rarely happens from like, boom, like a huge
Hmm.
hammer, sledgehammer, but it's like a schism, a fracture in the
Hmm.
system that has this cascading effect that begins to build out. But it's one person who decides to start taking a walk at lunch every day,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
And other people begin to observe it, and they come back and they seem really relaxed and refreshed, and they seem to be able to leave work even earlier. And maybe another person says, "Can I join you?" And then, these are the change happens, systems change happens by doing, it
Hmm.
happens by testing it out in small iterative bits. And what I always tell leaders is that, you know, a lot of the ideas that I share are not necessarily difficult to do. They're difficult to stick with, right? And they also seem terrifying because they seem like they're not connected to bottom line. They seem like they're not, they're counter to being efficient. It's actually, if we test them out, we say we don't have to change the entire system immediately, but
Mhm.
if we just test out starting our meetings with 5 minutes of question storming or doodling,
Mhm.
and then ask for feedback and see and just do it for a month and see what do people experience. Maybe you'll discover it's a wash, no, we won't do it. Maybe you'll discover, well, that was amazing. Let's keep doing that. Or maybe you'll discover there's this other little thread that we've pulled out from this experience that we didn't expect. Let's continue down that walk of momentum. So it's about being remaining open, remaining curious to the suggestions to change, and paying attention to the impact that these changes have on people's behavior, on how they're showing up for work, how they're contributing. But you've got to at least be open to the
Yeah.
change.
So
Something like,
I'm
yeah.
willing to kind of be optimistic because I think I should be, and I you know in when you work in change, and I want to be optimistic, but I'm also sometimes, if you work for large organizations and you go through these kind of, sessions and you help and you coach and then all of a sudden there's a new CEO and the whole thing changes. So there, in our line of business, there are also a lot of people, after a couple of years, trying to do this, who might go like, what impact did it actually have? And sometimes you just don't know because I have to say that sometimes I meet a client that I did some work for years ago, and they say, no, 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 what you did was like, but they never told me. So I was like, oh, I had impact. Oh, well, you should have called me. But my question would be, do you think, if you look at, and let's forget about, all the things that are happening right now with, somehow, especially in the US, you think, oh, I think we're going back to the 50s, which is not where we want to go. However, forget about all that. Say that's just a little bump in the road, and it is a long-term thing. Change is slow. It's and to your point, yes, you start with little things, and that slowly starts to gradually start to change culture and change behavior, etc. But do you think there's also or what would you say if I say um, we have to come up with completely new organizational um, models? So the old pyramid shape that we're kind of now kind of, most companies are kind of organized in the same similar way. We have a few people on top, mostly men, mostly white men, dudes, and then there's this pyramid, and then there's something wrong with that. I don't think that's something, it's not sustainable. And a company that is just focused on growth is really not, if you look at nature, nothing in nature grows forever unless it's a cancer. And it's what it is. And so there's something wrong with that system. And if you think about innovation and change and all that, and we're also as professionals and as people who are advocating for creativity and diversity of thought and happiness and all that. Um, do you think those systems will be the ones that you know will they survive, or do we need completely new systems?
Well, yeah, we need new systems, but systems change does not happen. Um, there's already, first of all, there's already variables in the system
Mhm.
that are shifting and moving.
True.
There's so many variables that we're not accounting for. So, for example, on the supply side, will young people insist on keep continue to working the same way? I don't think that they will.
Good point.
They're not motivated in the same way that I'm a Gen Xer that my generation has been motivated by, right? They
Mhm.
also have come of age in a world with a very different set of constraints. They are exposed to people who are different from them in ways that I'm not for good and for bad, right? But the point is that if our assumption is that the inputs into the system people are going to keep showing up with the same expectations, same set of questions, that's a very erroneous assumption. So that's one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that when we shift our mental models, we shift behaviors, and that shifts culture. But it has to start with the ways we think. I actually don't consult anymore. I spend my time in speaking, writing, and thinking advisory work. And the thinking part is really the learning
Hmm.
modules and micro courses I am developing, because it's my perspective, if we equip people with new ways to think, they
Agree.
will test it on their own way. And it will be micro groups within these organizations that will test them out. Also, there are other new organisms that are sprouting up that are testing out new ways of working. This is all going to have an effect on this larger system. It can't help but do that. But
Hmm.
the other thing is, we've got to challenge ways we've been thinking about growth. So I
Hmm.
love the British economist Daniel Susskind,
Hmm.
and the way his latest book is about growth. And the front cover is like this, this like this XY axis and this big old bold straight line, and maybe it has a couple of dents down. And in my book, I Move, Think, Rest, I offer a very different model of productivity and growth based on something called cultivation, because the ways that we think about being productive are a relic of the first industrial revolution.
Exactly.
And as Daniel Susskind points out, there's so many things linked to GDP that GDP doesn't even count, like search engines and email, right? And what we could call invisible work, to borrow from feminist language about the unseen work that women do, right?
Hmm.
But there are ways that we produce value today that are unaccounted for because
Hmm.
we are clinging to old models. And what I've proposed in my book is that we look back to agricultural based economies where the modus operandi was cultivation. So, where productivity values either or, I measure what I can see, it's outputs based, it's based on micromanagement. Cultivation is a both and model. Cultivation values the solo practitioner and the collective. Cultivation values what's happening on the
Right.
visible realm and what's happening during dormancy. And cultivation values quick spurts of growth and slow. And the model of growth that I propose is one of the bicycle wheel. So the ways you move forward in a bicycle, yes, there's upward growth, but to get traction, you must be willing to go down, grip the earth, and go
Right.
back up again in order to propel yourself forward. And that to me is a much more realistic visual of how growth happens. Growth gets cultivated when we go up, but then we revisit what's happened and we revisit the past, and then we
That's
collect a
your
little
move,
there.
think, rests.
Yeah, yeah, but
Mm.
that's how growth happens in natural environments. That's
Exactly.
how growth happens in our body, in the human body. That's how growth happens in human systems, right?
Right.
Growth doesn't happen with this nice little neat, convenient, straight, upwardly,
Exactly.
arrow. I mean, uh I don't think that growth is finite, because I mean, one of the reasons I call my business figure eight thinking is, number one, I'm a nerd and I love to think. And I've just said that change happens when we shift our mental models. But the other reason is that figure eight is a visual of the iterative process of problem solving. You diverge, you converge, we can call it double diamond, whatever you want to call it, right? But it's that iterative process of revisiting and building out an idea. But that number eight, that shape also reflects infinity. There's an infinite number of ways to be creative. There's an infinite number of ways to be innovative if we call upon a range of inputs, questions, people to help us think in new ways about the problem or the opportunity.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you mentioned this. We had a guest on the show previously, Alize Bolin, and one of the passion projects she's working on is a group about the menstrual cycle, and it's called Crampy. And so it's really great. And one of the things that she just shared about was how she got a group of women together and was talking about how they wish kind of the world was designed to take into accommodation the cycles, because men operate on a 24-hour cycle, and then female biology operates on a 24-hour cycle, but also the 30-day monthly cycle. So um, but then to come back to what you're saying, right? With this traction of a bicycle wheel, it's okay, you plant a seed, but you can't force it to grow. So you have to just you can give it the right soil and the right water and the right sunshine, but you cannot force it to grow. So you kind of have to sit and wait. So she was talking about the connections there, but she also pointed out that this type of cyclical growth, or not growth, but cycles is also happening already within organizations. We just don't always see it. And she mentioned that people for the seasonal shopping around Christmas time, they hire a bunch of new employees to make sure they have enough people for the big crowds that come in. And this is a cyclical business operation that works, that is operated, of course, the yearly financial cycle. But
But
then,
Morgan, that's such a great example of the crampy examples is such a great example because women, because of what our bodies go through by adolescence up through middle age, are constantly aware of adapting to change. It's just part of how you exist. Nothing is a straight line. You must adapt, you must pivot, you must sit down, regroup, carry on. Like that's just what the biology of women uh, kind of forces upon you to just accept. And then
yeah,
there's that moment of pausing called menopause, right? So then
yeah,
there's that
Oh
moment of
yeah. Oh, that's
right,
a,
there's
sorry.
that.
That's a cool.
And another wrench in the system, right?
Yes, it's a pause.
To,
Yeah.
to
Oh, never
pause.
thought about that.
But even the I wrote
It's
an essay. I wrote an essay about why I love getting older. And then I reflected on the messages that Western society teaches us about menstruation is that you push through, you
yeah,
carry through, jump back on that balance beam,
yeah,
go for a jog, swim those laps. The body is actually telling you, can we just slow down just for a couple days during this time of the month, right? Right. And so the natural environment is telling us it's okay to pause. And a matter of fact, you're gonna and like 30 years from now, you're really gonna be hitting a moment where you have to pause, right? Your body is pausing. But it's so interesting how and I'm sure the men's body is going through a cycle that
mhm,
I just don't know about. Maybe our science doesn't know about yet, or they do, but we're not paying attention. But everything in nature is
of
about
course.
cycles and shifts and
Yeah.
change.
We're not paying attention to it. And
Right.
yeah, of course. I mean, and I think although there's more attention to men's bodies, to be quite honest, yeah, if you have done some work in healthcare with a lady who is professor in the sex and gender medicine, and I was so amazed by just the little things she said about how little sort of the medical science actually knows about the female body. And so you're like, what do you mean? Yeah, so because everything's actually made for men, and it goes all the way to when they start testing things on mice. It's not female mice. It's so they
And when
really,
they're testing on humans, they're using small men,
yeah.
not women.
Well, yeah, yeah, and there's a sort of a reason because of hormonal change, and also, you can't really test on women when they're pregnant, and so you don't do that, and so there's certain things that you go like, okay, I know kind of where it started, but it's totally unacceptable because it just means that when you go to a doctor, women often, so things like when they suffer from a heart attack.
yeah. I
uh,
just learned. I just learned a few months ago. Women have different heart attack symptoms.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Never
Because but we
even.
don't but we don't know. We only know the male no, the symptoms. We don't know because maybe women get sent to, you must be stressed, and right. So that's anyway. Sorry, it's a totally different topic, but it's sort of
No, but it goes back to design.
it does.
Uh,
Yeah.
the in cars, the seat belts and
Yes.
the airbags are not designed with
Right.
women in mind.
Exactly.
With the physiology of women, the body mass of women, the relative height of women. It's not designed with women in mind.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a whole new podcast.
That is.
Well, actually, a whole series of them. And there should be because it's so important. But it has something to do with this pause. It has something to do with stop and look around. What are
Yeah.
you doing? For whom are we doing this? What else is there? So to understand more of, the context and things happen, and instead of, just going, having this tunnel vision, because that's basically where these things come from, because we don't pay
Yes.
attention. And also because we're always in a hurry, we're always in a rush, and it has to be finished and quick, and we have to be, and we cannot kind of, it's getting more and more difficult to actually pause and ask questions and to prototype and to test and to or to make mistakes and go like and most innovation, if not all innovation, comes from these serendipitous moments, making mistakes, going like, oh, I made a mistake, I dropped something. Oh, that's interesting.
Fascinating.
Right,
Yeah.
fascinating, what can we do here? Now it's like, no, 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 we don't have that. You didn't get the budget for that. You get a budget for that outcome, so leave it. Right. And I think we're in a pivotal moment. I think we're in a moment where we really have to kind of, step up. And because of technology, it shouldn't just be, the tech people who are leading that conversation. It should also be the, call them designers, creatives, or, the other people basically who think about more of context and more of the effect of on people. I think that is such an important moment that we're in. And I just, one thing I needed to kind of ask you, it's about daydreaming, because this daydreaming thing was so for me was kind of an interesting insight, or I had, are we sort of missing something? Because daydreamers because I was a daydreamer when I at school, and that was not a good thing.
Yeah, they called
Um,
me Space Cadet. That's not what you want.
Exactly. You were right. Yeah. They didn't have such a nice name for me. So it was just basically it's about, they think you're lazy, or they think you're dumb, or they think you're, and especially I had dyslexia, so they think I was stupid anyway. But this idea of daydreaming us, are we missing something there? Have we, are we, when we tell kids not to do that?
I think so. I mean, unfortunately, it's only in really privileged learning environments that young people as learners are allowed to fall in love with process versus the answer. And I was educated the first 6 years of school and traditional public school education. Well, preschool, I went to a really hippie, crunchy granola cooperative nursery school, which is great. But then I went to public school in the United States. Public school is tax funded. It's struggling with a lot of limitations and resources, and but I got really good at filling out the worksheet, figuring out what the answer was to get the gold star that the teacher wanted. And then I went to private Quaker prep school in Philadelphia, where it was a totally different culture of learning, where it was about ask a better question. It was about ask forgiveness, not permission. And I was just like, what is this? For like the first 2 years, my grades plummeted. I was also, it was a very socioeconomically different environment for me. I was an ethnic minority in the school. I was playing strange sports with sticks, like field hockey and
Oh,
lacrosse.
damn.
And had to
United
navigate
States,
getting.
that's very exotic. Let me tell you, Arna.
Yeah, well, from where I came from, we didn't play lacrosse or field hockey. We
Yeah.
we played,
Really?
handball and stickball and hopscotch and jump double dutch rope,
Uh,
and the
it's so
boys
big
played
here.
basketball.
Field
So
hockey
anyway,
is so big here. Yeah.
it was different, and so we need to give. First of all, I know this as a former educator. There's a bell curve in terms of the way we teach. And then
Mhm.
the center of that bell curve is verbal ways of learning. The tails of the bell curve are visual and oral and kinesthetic and experiential. And most of us are multilingual in terms of the ways that we learn. But our educational systems tends to attract people who were really good at verbal. I was great at verbal. And I loved learning in that way, but I also was very kinesthetic in the way that I learned and very experiential. And those people who are more oral, more verbal, right? But we don't teach to those multiple ways of learning. And what happens is that we disconnect from a whole slew of brilliant people who opt out of the system or find their path, sometimes accidentally, in new ways because they just are, they're not connecting in the ways that we force upon ways of learning. So in more privileged environments, like what I ended up with in high school, you get a lot more permission to want to wander, to figure it out, to experiment, to let this student be. A lot of times the class sizes are smaller, right? So it's complicated is the answer.
Mm.
We have a lot of constraints working against a way of learning that actually probably be much more conducive to a lot more people getting excited about learning and feeling seen and heard in terms of the ways that they learn.
Yeah, wonderful. We could talk for way longer, but we've been so I really really think I'm looking forward to your book, by the way, because that sounds very
Yeah,
very important.
certainly what I need to underline and emphasize in my own life.
Yeah. I have a last question, because otherwise you want to talk forever. What are you looking forward to? What is the thing that you're looking forward to the most?
A lot of things. I'm looking forward to swimming in Costa Rica
Hmm.
in about 6 weeks. I'm looking forward to figuring out how to offer my content in ways that are optimizing technology that help people to consume the ways I'm thinking about apply creativity on their own terms, on their own time. I'm going to be launching more micro courses. That's something I haven't figured it all out yet, but I'm launching experiments
Cool.
around that. And I'm also really looking forward to how people are going to respond to this book, Move, Think, Rest. I say in the introduction, people know this, but they're not doing it, right? And they're certainly not doing it in an integrative way. So I hope that the book is additive to people's lives and to their work, and I'm curious to see how people respond to it.
Yes. Thank you so much for being on this
Thank
podcast.
you. This was fun. I really appreciate you inviting me, and thank you for your patience on us getting this time together. It was wonderful meeting both of you, and I hope that we can meet in person at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah, love that. And you're here
exactly.
for Rotterdam. Yeah.